Welcome to Rivalries. Today, I'm joined by Greg O'Keefe. He's a writer from The Athletic, and he also co-hosts the Everton fan-led podcast All Together Now. Greg, it's great to have you on again. Now, a few weeks ago, a lot of us wondered if Everton were dead certs for relegation. But since then, you've beaten Arsenal and Leeds. So how has your new manager, Sean Dyche, turned things around?
Well, it's great to be back on the podcast, and yeah, as you sort of suggest in the question, he has had a big impact so far, Sean Dyche. Two really important wins, one unexpected perhaps against Arsenal, and then the essential one against Leeds, a Saturday just gone, coming on the back of a really disappointing Merseyside derby defeat. But we're already learning that Dyche has still got some of those qualities that he imbued his his teams at Burnley at their best with. And if anything, he's kind of looks like he's drilled into those direct, those powerful, those committed qualities that he demands from his players. And he's made Everton better in both boxes, defending set pieces and attacking them. He's made them more compact, and he's sort of got players to buy in already into what he demands in terms of physical output, and all those markers have gone right up since he took over from Frank Lampard. So yeah, it's quite promising. As I say, it was a really morale-sapping defeat at Anfield, and at which point you sort of, the sample size was 2 games, and you could say it was as bad at Anfield as it was good the previous weekend against Arsenal, really. But now we've seen another example of his stuff again at home. Obviously, Villa come to Goodison Park. I think that's where Everton are going to hope to prosper under him most this season, in a remit which is just purely to keep them in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, what's been sort of the major difference kind of tactically from when Frank Lampard was there? Because we always associate Sean Dyche as being quite, just a solid, compact team and gets a lot of goals from set pieces and that. But, what's been sort of the major tactical difference, do you think?
So, I mean, there's been not a sniff of 3 at the back, or a back 3 with wing backs, which is something that Lampard used to flirt with occasionally. It's been, sort of 2 centre backs, 2 full backs, and generally been 4 in midfield. Occasionally, because of Everton's striker problems, it's even been 4-5-1. But he certainly looked to make them, to sort of de-risk any areas where they can be overloaded. And he's having to just deal with what he can in terms of up front. But yeah, Lampard was all about, or wanted to be about, really Everton being a possession team, and about you sort of building from the back and moving towards his preferred 4-3-3. And there was a couple of examples of when it worked, most notably this season against Crystal Palace at home. Everton won 3-0, looked really good. But there were more examples of when it absolutely didn't. And the question was, did he have the players to play that style of football? It would appear not, given the way it ended for Frank. And I think Dyche is just being far more pragmatic, really. He's going about it in a more looking at what he's got, and that happens to fit largely his principles anyway. And so that's what he's going for. It is 2 banks of 4, maybe even an extra midfielder in there. And often, kind of not worrying about having possession, but looking to capitalise on long sort of diagonals into the forward players or player, and play off them there. But more than anything else is to kind of press with such energy and commitment, which was something that, again, Frank Lampard never really. Occasionally his team would press well, but then for some reason it was never consistent.
Right.
And obviously that's a lot to do with the opposition as well. But those 2 good games we've seen, Arsenal and Leeds, Everton pressing has been pretty superb. So I would expect more of the same against Villa, really.
Okay, and who are your key players at the moment, would you say?
Well, in terms of, so James Tarkowski, obviously a player that he's worked with before at Burnley, has been really good so far. I mean, he was anyway. He'd become a pretty much ever present since he was signed on a free by Lampard and Kevin Thelwell in the summer, and he's stood up even more under Dyche. You can tell he's He likes him, responds to his methods. He scored, obviously, the goal against Arsenal, nearly scored against Liverpool. Could have been a different game, ifs and buts, but had his head had gone in at Anfield rather than hitting the post. And he was excellent again against Leeds, so he's been really good. Abdoulaye Doucouré, who was a man who looked like he was only going one way, and that was out of the club under Frank Lampard, out of favour. He's actually out of contract in the summer. Probably underutilised. His supporters would maybe feel, and certainly he would feel, given the qualities he's shown in the past of dynamism and at his best the goal threat. Well, he's come right back into it under Dyche and has responded with some really, really good performances, most notably against Leeds when he was played slightly further forward behind Neil Maupay, who was the lone sort of target man, if you like, or striker anyway. And he's looked great. And yeah, Dwight McNeil again, someone who was a summer signing for Everton from Turf Moor under Lampard and fell well, but had to be charitable and flattered to deceive so far. He's only young, but relatively young, but a lot of people were looking at him thinking, this is again poor recruitment. The story of Everton's last 5 or 6 seasons, really. This is another example of a player who doesn't fit. He's too diffident for Goodison Park. He doesn't look like he's got the physical kind of power, or whether or not he's got the confidence to thrive in high pressure Goodison. And he's been great, in fairness to him, under Dyche. Obviously, my injury nose again, and those sorts of things you would look at for him have all improved, and his set pieces, his corner kicks have been a big part of why Everton are going to be a threat from them.
Okay, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a player that I think probably 2 years ago now, I looked at and saw his goal scoring record and his physicality and thought, like, this is a player who's going to go on and, really, maybe even be a starter for England in the not too distant future. And it's kind of just gone a bit quiet for him, really. Like, what's going on with Calvert-Lewin?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's one that Everton fans ask themselves pretty much every day. Injury has been the main problem. Repeated injuries, perhaps under previous managers, coming back too soon in a bid to kind of, he's desperate to play. I don't think his attitude is in question, but he's come back a bit too soon, and that's actually been counterproductive because he's suffered re-injuries. And at the end of last season, I don't know if you saw, Frankie, but there was the alarming kind of, well, it was the wonderful denouement to another injury hit season from his point of view when he scored that fantastic header against Palace at Goodison and kept Everton up, sealed the win. And then after the season, he posted on Instagram about his mental health during the campaign and how bad it had been, even seeming to hint that it got to a crisis point with his own mental health, which was alarming to see. And without wishing to speculate about him in that regard, it's been a case of more of the same with injuries this season. So you wonder, you hope he's okay. It must be absolutely maddening for him to not be able to get playing consistently. It is at best a game and a half, 2 games in, more out. And as you say, he was, his career was absolutely on the up. It was interesting watching him and Patrick Bamford. Well, not watching Dom because Calvert-Lewin was injured, but watching Bamford on Saturday, because him and Calvert-Lewin were vying for that kind of England's next, but the people to go and support Harry Kane and to be in and around the squads. And Calvert-Lewin was and scored a goal for England. But that feels like a distant memory now, and I think he'd just love to get playing regularly for Everton before anything else.
Yeah, because he's a fantastic player, I think, when he's at his best. His physicality, his finishing, everything about him. He looks like a real perfect striker. Yeah. And that Palace goal, I think, bizarrely, that Palace game, I was at Villa Park watching Villa Burnley when Sean Dyche was manager at Burnley. I remember going in at half time and being like, my God, Everton are actually going to go. They're going to go. Because it was just, it's such one of those names that you just can't imagine ever leaving the Premier League. And then coming in at full time and being like, I cannot believe that. And I remember going straight home and watching the highlights and turning the volume right up. Because when that crowd reaction, when it's just so epic like that, it was absolutely amazing to watch that, really. But it was
goosebumps. It was a massive goosebumps moment for us as well.
Yeah, but you're still, you've got 2 really crucial wins recently, but you are still kind of in and around that kind of relegation quagmire. Let's face it. There's so many teams that there's no one really away at the bottom at the moment. Do you still have any worries, or do you think that Sean Dyche has shown enough already that you think maybe you can get away from this quite soon?
I mean, I'm marginally less worried, and the signs are pointing in a bit more of a positive direction. But I'm absolutely still concerned about Everton's Premier League survival. Yeah, because as good as Dyche has proven in those two games, he's going to be massively hampered by the lack of a fit centre forward. If Calvert-Lewin at best is going to play half of the remaining 15 or 16 games at best, then Everton, because of their own poor recruitment in January, have left themselves bereft of options. They had to withdraw Ellis Sims from loan at Sunderland. Now he's come in, he's at 22, he's not played much in the Premier League. He played at Anfield and didn't do much, came on against Leeds and looked a little bit better. Maybe he'll present an option going forward, but it's a big ask. And then short of that, there's no one. I mean, Neil Maupay obviously brought not to play as a target man whatsoever, more to play off the sides. Yeah. In stature, not the biggest player, so he wouldn't really present the traditional Dyche target man. Although his work rate was great against Leeds, but that will be my worry. Is essentially Everton don't score many goals. Right. Obviously, 2 under Dyche so far in 3 games, 2 1-0 wins. But if they're going to start playing teams that are going to have a go and maybe sort of score first or put a couple past them, my concern is that they're not going to come back in those games. And as you say, it's so tight down there. If hand on heart now, I think they'll stay up because I think Dyche will probably eke out another 4 or 5 1-0s, and that'll do it. But I wouldn't like to bet on it. It's just my feeling is that they're safer under him. But you're right, it's so tight down there. A win and you're out the bottom 3, like it was with us against Leeds. It'll be interesting to see how Leeds go. And Javi Gracia, a lot of people wondering if that's the right choice for them. Let's see what happens there. Who could have picked Southampton beating Chelsea? Just crazy,
just unbelievable. Yeah,
it's just so chopped and changed all the time, and I'm a bit calmer about it under Dyche certainly anyway. But yeah, absolutely no guarantees the way the season's going. And just to add to what you were saying about last season and Palace, and it's to the frustration of Everton fans that we're in this situation again after just sort of the whole never again thing last season.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of Blues felt that Lampard should have gone around the time Steven Gerrard did at Villa, and probably they would have hoped that they then would have been able to. Same, when Wolves made their change, and they would hope they might have been in the discussion for some of the more progressive, better managers like Unai Emery, like Lopetegui, but they left it a bit later. Understandably, they wanted to give Lampard time after being rightly accused of being too rash in chopping and changing in the past. But by the time they did get rid of Lampard, it was the situation gotten really bad. So yeah, it's interesting. I think Dyche is the right man for this moment at Everton. But yeah, I think quite a few Blues would say they should have acted when Villa did.
Yeah, I am fascinated to see how he does. Particularly, Everton do have greater resources than Burnley, I suppose, and I'm interested to see how he does with a club that kind of has a little bit more probably for him to spend over the years if he can solidify himself at Everton. But this Saturday you're playing Aston Villa. And amazingly, you haven't actually beaten Villa in 7 years. I can't quite get my head around the fact that Villa have a team that we actually have a good record against in recent years. Other than a kind of poor recent record, is there anything about the current Villa team that worries you for the game at Goodison?
Yeah, I think the fact that they look like they can score, as I said, they look like they can score a couple of goals in games, and you'll tell me, but I thought they were excellent at the weekend. Really, unlucky in many ways. Ollie Watkins looked back to what again. It's when you dip in and out of clubs and paying attention to things. You remember him as someone who looked like this is a top prospect, and then people go off the boil, but he looked great against Arsenal in terms of how he took that goal. Buendia is the type of creative player Everton haven't got anymore. Probably since the likes of James Rodriguez and Luca Dean went, really. So Anthony Gordon didn't have any assists this season before he was sold, so wasn't that creative. Alex Iwobi can be, but Buendia looks a danger man, in that sort of further forward role. So yeah, my concern would just be that if Everton aren't going to score more than one goal, can they keep Villa out?
Yeah.
And I think we will see about that. Jordan Pickford's been in decent form, massive clanger in the derby, but other than that, he's been pretty reliable. So yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I think Villa's away form has been really impressive generally under Unai Emery. We lost 3-1 at Man City in our most recent away day, but it's Man City, I guess. And we have just lost 3 in a row. And the problem is we seem to be very threatening going forward. We seem to be able to carve open quite decent chances, but I think as we transition into a team that plays it around at the back, we seem to be either capable of making mistakes or just getting caught. We're very much like a team transitioning to what Unai Emery wants.
Yeah,
that's probably going to take a while, and we're probably just going to have to get used to some of those big errors happening. But as you say, I mean, against Sean Dyche last year at Burnley, I remember we won 3-1, and that was very late in the season. And Buendia was quite a key player in that game. So I wonder if Everton sit back a bit, maybe that actually benefits Villa quite a bit on Saturday. It's an intriguing one. 2 teams that are kind of transitioning with new managers. It's quite hard to call that, really. And we're not very good at defending set pieces. So again, that's probably
encouraging from my point of view.
Yeah, that's probably not going to hurt Sean Dyche's chances at all. But when you look at Villa, I think you mentioned a couple there. But is there any one particular player who gives you cause for concern?
I would say Buendia at the moment. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sort of tricky player who can sort of create something out of nothing. Like you say, someone that we've lacked that sort of player for a good while. And if Watkins is going to be back on form, I suppose you have players as well that won't be bullied necessarily. So Douglas Luiz won't you wouldn't imagine be pressed and physically intimidated. I think one of the things they did against Arsenal was they kind of did stop them at source really from playing their game. And and I suppose if Villa are trying to play in that way, a bit possession based, maybe it'll work for Everton, maybe not, but possibly. Would you say Villa are a bit more physical than Arsenal in midfield potentially?
I'm not sure we've got anyone quite at the physicality of like a Thomas Partey. I think again that's probably one of
the Everton game. You see, yeah.
Oh, was it right? Yeah, that. I mean, Boubacar Kamara has had a fantastic start to the season. Really, he has looked like a really good CDM. But he's actually the most recent 3 games is probably where he's been at his weakest all season. So I wouldn't say Villa are massively physical in the middle. John McGinn's probably that bit of awkward physicality. But we can be got at, I think. It's an interesting one. I do wonder at the moment whether we're just a bit better when we kind of play as the away team where we sit back, which is probably why we did all right against Arsenal, because we could allow them we could invite the pressure, as we did at Tottenham when we won 2-0, as we have done in most of our away games. So it's going to be quite interesting if Everton do sit back, whether we just get caught on the break or in those set pieces. I think set pieces probably are going to be quite crucial with Everton, and maybe that first 15 minutes where the crowd's really up for it and you go at Villa, maybe you can just get at us. If I was to predict it, I'd say it's a high scoring game, and I'm not confident at all. But I'm going to say a draw. Going to go 2-2, I think. How do you feel about it? Do you think you can finally end this strange losing run you seem to be on against Villa?
Well, I mean, we've had some really entertaining high-scoring draws over the years, haven't we? When Everton and Villa have often been neck and neck to try and break into that top 5 or 6 under Moyes and previous Villa managers as well. I was more, I was and I'm more concerned about Villa than I was Leeds. I think Villa have got better players, obviously a better manager, and more ways to hurt Everton. It's interesting what you say about like the 2 teams in transition, and kind of who's going to want the ball and who's going to want to be on the front foot and sort of take the game to the opposition. It's be fascinating to see how that evolves, really. Because I think obviously Everton would rather play against a team that want to keep the ball. I think at the moment, But Everton at home, the onus is on them. They massively need to keep winning. I just wonder. I could see it being a draw as well. I can't see Everton scoring more than one, although I hope I'm wrong. I'm going to go 1-1.
Okay, yeah, I think that's yeah. I think we've both gone for the draw. Well, Greg, it's been absolutely brilliant to chat to you again, and I wish Everton all the luck this season, except not when you play Villa, of course. But for anybody who wants to see your work, where can we find you online?
So yeah, I'm on the Athletic. Greg Evans, clearly my colleague, writes about Villa. Yeah. I do Everton and lots of different things on the Athletic, and you can see me on Twitter at Greg OK. So that's at GREG OK. And yeah, good luck for the season. Like you say, massive club Villa's one that Everton look at with parallels sometimes, and when we are considering the prospect of going down, I think a lot of people say, well at least I hope we deal with it like Villa did. But let's hope we don't have to come to that. But yeah, good luck for the rest of the season with you two.